Let's go to God in prayer as we open up our time together. God, again, we thank you for today. It's a time that involves a whole lot of uncertainty for us. For some, it's a time of anxiety. For some, it's a time of fear. But in all things, we know that you are here and you are near. We thank you for your presence. We thank you for your faithfulness. And we thank you for the hope and the certainty that we have in you. Father, as we open up your word, I pray that you would allow us to be still. I pray that your Spirit would move within us, that you would change us, transform us, shape us, and mold us into your image. We thank you for the way your Spirit moves and works and leads. And as we leave from this space together, I pray that we would continue to be in tune with the way your Spirit works on us. The convictions that we receive through messages, through people, through encounters that we have, that we are always available to you. We thank you for Jesus, the hope we have in his blood, and the unity we have in his sacrifice. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Well, we're going to look at, for the next few weeks anyway, a series of lessons here called No Fear, Faith in Uncertain Times. Because, you know, we are living in uncertain times. And we're going to look at different characters, different people in Scripture, and look at how, as they went through different kinds of struggles, they were able to maintain their faith in God. So today we're going to look at Job. We're not going to look at 42 chapters of Job, but we are going to look at the story of Job. And we're just going to begin, and I want you to see and I want you to hear this, all right, because this is the big message of Job. That even when we don't know why we are suffering, we should trust God no matter what. We don't really understand why suffering comes. But even when we don't know why, that's a question that we ask a lot, is why something happens. We don't have to know the why to understand that God is faithful. We don't have to know the why to understand that God continues to do all the things that he said he was going to do. Is that next one up here, Joe? There we go. I don't have to know the why. I like to know the why. It's a question I ask frequently. Why do we have to do this? My kids have asked it all of their lives. You ask them to do something, their first question is, why? And there comes a time and a place where maybe the why is important. But sometimes we just need to understand that we just need to be present with a faithful God. We don't have to know the why. What we have to know is that God is trustworthy, God is faithful, and we should trust in him no matter what. And that's not easy to do. In Job chapter 1, let's read the first, at least part of the first chapter here of Job. The story begins this way. In the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job. And this man was blameless and upright, and he feared God, and he shunned evil. We know that he had many blessings, and his house was full, his land was full, his coffers were full. One day, verse 6, one day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And Satan answered the Lord, "Oh, from roaming the earth, going back and forth on it." And then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied, "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything that he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." You see, there's this scene that kind of come about and it unfolds here where Satan comes in and asks God, basically appears in his court, and God looks and he says, "Hey, Satan, you don't think people are very kind, you don't think they're very faithful people, but have you considered Job? There is no one like Job, blameless, upright, and righteous." And Satan comes in and says, "Of course he's faithful to you. blessed him with everything. He's got no reason not to trust you. His life is good. His family is whole. His land is prosperous. He's got all the money that he needs. He doesn't want for anything. Why wouldn't he trust you? And God then allows Satan to do something to Job. God allows Satan to come in and take all of those blessings away just to see, just to prove that people can be faithful. Satan does just that. Job loses everything. His family, his wealth, his health. God allows Job to suffer. And Job wrestles with why all of this is happening to him. And while everyone around him loses faith in God or blames Job for his own troubles, Job remains faithful to God. And in the end, everything is restored. Right? And so people are falling away. Job's friends are coming up and they're saying, look, Job, I don't know what you've done to make God angry, but you've got to change something. I know you say you're blameless and you say you're righteous, but this kind of stuff doesn't happen to righteous people. And Job continues to come to God and he says, God, why in the world are you doing this to me? In fact, the book of Job can be summed up in those two words. Why, God? Why would you take this from me? Why are you treating me like this way? Why did I do this? What have I done to deserve the things that you are giving to me? Because you're treating me like a sinner, and I'm not a sinner, I'm a righteous man, and I don't understand. Why, God? And there's something, really remarkable in the book of Job. We'll touch on this more at the end, but Job never receives that answer from God. He asks God why, and God simply responds by saying, why are you asking me? Do you not trust me? Do things have to be perfect for you to trust me, or are you willing to give me everything and trust that I know more than you? Do you need all of the blessings of this earth to be faithful to me, or is simply having a relationship with God enough to sustain you? Job never gets an answer. But what Job is wrestling with is this thing called a theodicy. And theodicy is an area of theology that really tries to answer this question: how can a loving, all-powerful God allow people to suffer? It's one of the great struggles we have as Christians in explaining, in defending God, if you will, as if God needs to be defended. Common struggle between Job and his friends as he suffers is the question: who is at fault? Who is to blame for what they are enduring? Job chapter 4, verses 7 through 8. Consider who has perished when he was innocent. Where have the honest been destroyed? In my experience, those who plow injustice and those who sow trouble reap the same. These are words from Job's friends who are supposed to be there to encourage. These are the words of the people who come to Job and say, look, there is something going on in your life and we can see it. It's a time when people believed in retribution theology, that if evil or sickness happened to someone, it was because of sin in their life. And while this is true for some situations, it doesn't seem to apply to Job. God himself says, have you considered Job? He is an upright, blameless, and pure man, in whom we can find no fault. Job continues to justify his innocence and insists that his troubles are not because of some hidden sin in his life. And by the end of the story, God reveals that Job has not sinned, and he wasn't being punished. Job 42, 7 through 17. After the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, for you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. Now take 7 bulls, 7 rams, go to my servant Job and offer a burnt offering for yourselves. And then my servant Job will pray for you, and I will surely accept his prayer and not deal with you as your folly deserves. For you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. Then Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite went and did as the Lord had told them. And the Lord accepted Job's prayer. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his prosperity and doubled his previous possessions. All of his brothers and sisters and former acquaintances came to his house and dined with him in his house. They sympathized with him and comforted him concerning all the adversity the Lord had brought on him. Each one gave him a kesitah and a gold earring, so the Lord blessed the last part of Job's life more than the first. He owned 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, excuse me, and 1,000 female donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He named his first daughter Jemimah, his second Keziah, and his third Karen-Happuch. No women as beautiful as Job's daughters could be found in all the land, and their father granted them an inheritance with their brothers. Job lived 140 years after this and saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. And then Job died old and full of days. And so we see that Job in the end is vindicated, at least in the eyes of God and the eyes of people, by the testimony of God. It wasn't because of his sin that he was allowed to suffer. No, it was so that Satan would understand something about the nature of God and about the nature of his people. And it's a lesson that Job never could have understood, even had he been made aware. It never really explains why all this occurs to Job, specifically except that God's faith that Job would not abandon his belief. The story doesn't give us an answer as to why evil happens when it's not deserved in some way. But ultimately, Job continues his faith in God's wisdom and his mercy in life. When someone asks you why bad things happen, or you hear people try to explain why bad things happen, think of the different ways in which people come up to explain this. Well, maybe it's just karma. What goes around comes around. The things that you sow, you will surely reap. We have this understanding that we try to understand how these things transpire, why they transpire. Now, sometimes we just explain it away as the stupidity of people. That they make foolish choices and this is just the consequences of their action. They've done this to themselves. They put themselves in this situation. And they've caused their own kind of suffering to come about in their own way. There's one thing that is constant in Job's life. Faith in God is the one thing that never wavers in the story of Job. Even in the midst of loss, even in the midst of anguish, even in the midst of agony, there is one thing that Job remains certain of. He doesn't understand why it's happening. He doesn't know what's coming next. He doesn't understand why his friends are talking to them the way that they are. But the one thing he does know is that God is who God says that he is. Faith is the one thing that is constant in Job's life. It wavers. I mean, there's a time where he's looking and he goes, I don't understand. And, I'm on the verge of folding up here. He's frustrated. He complains to God in 21 in verse 4, amongst other places. He wishes that he had never been born in chapter 3 in verse 3. He questions God, but still comes back to a trust in the Creator of all things. And this is what I love about the faith of Job. It isn't pretty. It isn't perfect. It isn't nice, neat, and wrapped up in a bow, but it's present. It perseveres, even through the deepest of agonies. There's a trust that God is good, that he is powerful, that he is loving, that he is merciful, and overall he is wise. However, the God that Job had faith in was not some abstract concept. It was a personal being with whom he had cultivated a relationship with before all this calamity happened. You see, when we read the story of Job, we know what Job didn't know, and we know that at the end it all comes back around full circle for him, and he's going to be okay. But in the middle of it, Job didn't know that. And even when his wife looked at him and said, "What do you mean you're still trusting in this God? Look at what has happened to you. Curse your God and die," is what his wife asked him to do. Job said, "I don't understand what's going on. But one thing I do know, God is faithful." And when all was lost, Job knew that he could count on God. And he knew that because he had already laid the groundwork to having this kind of a relationship. You see, if you've never spoken with God before and something bad happens and your first response to God is, "Who in the world are you and why are you doing this to me?" it doesn't have the same kind of impact. But because Job had built a relationship with God, he could come to God with some very bold and brazen questions, knowing that even if he did not like the answer he received, he would still find himself in the mercy and in the grace of God. See, as Christians, we know something else that Job didn't know yet. That God would reveal himself in his only Son, Jesus Christ. And Christ's sacrifice didn't just atone for sin, but it gave us the right to a real relationship with God. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 16. Says, "Therefore let us approach the throne of grace with boldness so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us at the proper time." And so the question comes to you. Where do you turn in your time of need? Where do you go to find strength? Where do you go to find comfort? Where do you go to find solace? Where do you turn in times of need? When you are suffering, with what or with whom do you put your trust in? Do you come back to the things that you have and say, "Hey, look, at least I know these things aren't going away. They're mine. I own them. Nobody can take them away legally." Some people turn to substances. Some people turn to friends. Some people turn to notoriety and fame. When you are in pain, we sometimes reach for anything that will bring relief, even if it is not lasting relief. We just want that momentary relief from the pain. And sometimes that can cost us more than we bargained for. Sometimes we turn to food. Sometimes we turn to sleep. There are all kinds of avenues, there are all kinds of things that the world says this will bring you the relief that you desire, but there is really and truly only one thing that brings the relief and the pain and the heartache that this world has to offer. The gospel of Jesus transforms. The message of Jesus says, "I have already paid everything that you need for a relationship with God. The only thing you need is me. Am I enough for you?" That's the answer that Job gets from God. It's the answer that Jesus gives as well when we have questions about all the things that may go on, that Jesus just simply says, "Am I enough for you, or do you need something more than me?" The truth is that we don't need anything more, but sometimes we have ourselves so convinced that there is something more that we need. The sufficiency of God to endure, the faithfulness of God to be present in times of need, in times of distress, in times of anxiety, in times of suffering. Not only is Jesus enough, he is more than enough. In the book of Ephesians, Paul says, "Now to him who is able to do sufficiently enough, just enough. No, he says, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. The Spirit of God that dwells and lives in you is able to do immeasurably more than you can imagine. My hope and my prayer is that you will trust in the Spirit that lives within you to give you the strength that you need in a time of need, in times of anxiety, in times of uncertainty, that you will find peace in believing in Jesus. Maybe there's some way the church can be of assistance to you. I know that we don't have this in person right now, but if there's some way that I can be in prayer for you this week, you can send me an email to office@goodwoodchurch.org. If you know of someone in our community that needs help picking up and delivering groceries, cutting a yard, trimming some flowers, doing some things around the house that they aren't normally able to do, I have a whole bunch of people that have called and said, we're there to help any way as possible. So if you know of someone that is in need, or if you are in need of something, don't hesitate to call or email, and we'll do our best to get somebody there as soon as possible. I love you. And more than that, God loves you. And God is here for you. God is faithful and God is unmoving. And may we anchor ourselves to an unmoving God in these times. And I hope and pray that we can get together again soon because I miss you.